Welcome, friends. You're watching the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we have an exceptionally packed day. Events are unfolding simultaneously across multiple fronts, and each one deserves a thorough breakdown. Before we get into it, I want to ask you something important. Please subscribe to the channel and make sure you hit the notification bell. YouTube actively suppresses this type of content, placing conflict analysis channels into shadow bans, which means even subscribers often simply don't see new uploads in their feed. The bell is the only reliable way to get notified and never miss a critical briefing. Thank you for your support. Now let's get to work. Kharkiv direction. Advance north of the city. Let's start with what is arguably the most significant news of the past 24 hours, the Kharkiv sector of the front. The Russian Ministry of Defense, together with the northern group of forces, has officially confirmed a substantial improvement of positions in the area of the settlement of Veteranoye, located just north of Kharkiv. This confirmation isn't merely declarative, it is backed by video footage published by various sources documenting the actual fighting for this settlement. The published footage clearly shows Russian units methodically advancing through the built-up area of Veteranoye. The key moment comes in the final seconds of the video, where at least 2 Russian servicemen raise the Russian flag over a building in the southwestern part of the settlement. This is not simply a symbolic gesture. It is documentary evidence of control being established over a specific point on the map. It is precisely on the basis of this material, together with official reports from the Ministry of Defense, that corresponding map corrections are being made. As recently as April 20th, the front line in this sector looked different. Today, it already looks different again. What comes next? Analysts are divided here, and the honest answer is this. At the current stage, there is insufficient information to draw definitive conclusions about the direction of the next move. 2 vectors are theoretically open to the Russian army: a push southward toward Kazachalopan or a shift toward the settlement of Udi. However, if we rely on the publicly stated doctrine, the Russian president's stated commitment to systematically creating a buffer zone along the state border, logic suggests that activity in this sector will not decrease but increase in the near term. The Kharkiv direction remains strategically significant, and that must be accepted as a given in any operational analysis. The city of Kharkiv itself also warrants a separate mention. During the night of April 21st and into the morning hours, the Russian side continued striking the locomotive depot in the city. Both missiles and drones were employed. The targeting logic is clear: a systematic degradation of the Ukrainian armed forces' logistical capabilities on this operational axis. Local residents documented the strikes on video. The footage is publicly available. Kupiansk direction. Gerasimov's briefing and the eastern bank of the Oskol. We move now to the northeastern part of Kharkiv Oblast. Here, the primary source of information over the past 24 hours was the chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, Valery Gerasimov, who delivered a detailed briefing on the operational situation across virtually every axis. Regarding Kupiansk, Gerasimov's key claim concerns the eastern bank of the Oskol River. According to him, by April 21, 2026, the Russian army had established full control over the entire eastern bank of the river. This is a serious claim, if confirmed. However, a caveat is necessary. At the time this briefing was prepared, no geolocated evidence had been published that could unambiguously verify this assertion. We have the word of the Chief of the General Staff, and we have video footage suggesting the opposite. The footage in question appeared just the day before, shot in the central or southeastern part of the settlement of Kupiansk-Vuzlovyi. It documents ongoing combat activity, indicating that Ukrainian forces retain a presence in certain sections of the eastern bank. In other words, the situation likely stands as follows. The Russian army has indeed suppressed organized resistance across most of the eastern Oskol bank, but the mopping up of isolated pockets is still ongoing. We are waiting for geolocations and video confirmation. Given the current dynamics, these should emerge over the coming days, particularly as both sides traditionally intensify their information output ahead of the May holidays. On the central Kupiansk sector, the area between Borova and Studenok, Gerasimov made another statement that can only be described as sensational. fighting is already underway within the city limits of Borova itself. Looking at current mapping services, whether pro-Ukrainian, pro-Russian or neutral, not one of them currently shows Russian presence inside the settlement. But the Chief of the General Staff apparently works with data that outpaces public cartography. Confirming objective control footage will likely emerge in the near future. Further south, equally noteworthy information. Russian units have reportedly advanced through the Sviatohirsk forest and are conducting combat operations on the territory of Studenok and Sviatohirsk. For Sviatohirsk, footage published since early 2026 has already indirectly confirmed Russian army presence in at least the northeastern part of the city. For Studenok, this is effectively the first reported fighting there since 2022. The situation is developing rapidly, but at this stage all of these claims rest solely on Gerasimov's words and await documentary confirmation. Lyman direction, 70% of the city and the logic of the May deadline. Lyman. According to the Chief of the General Staff, by the close of April 21st, Russian units controlled approximately 70% of the settlement. Once again, a figure without verifying geolocations. Nevertheless, it fits the broader picture of sustained, sequential pressure on this axis. The strategic context here is critical. Lyman is not simply another settlement on the front line. Its fall would give the Russian army access to the M03 highway, enabling dense drone-based fire control over a considerable stretch of territory. This would significantly worsen the position of the Ukrainian garrison and complicate logistics across the entire sector. On the other side of the equation, the Ukrainian side is acutely aware of Lyman's importance. Holding a bridgehead on the Russian side of the Siversky Donets is a resource-intensive undertaking. Personnel, ammunition, and equipment flow there in a constant stream. But surrendering the city means handing the adversary an operational foothold and a propaganda victory. The coming weeks on the Lyman axis will therefore be extremely intense. The reason is straightforward. The May holidays are always, in part, an information war. Neither side wants to enter the holidays with an unfavorable balance on the map, meaning the tempo of combat will rise as the date approaches. In the Kryvyi Luka and Ozern area, the semi-encirclement is tightening. Russian forces are methodically cutting off supply routes. Footage of multiple launch rocket system strikes on the forest area southwest of Ozern and north of Kryvyi Luka has been published. The day before, strikes by TOS Sontsepek thermobaric systems against forest areas east of the river. Both facts point to the same conclusion. Russian units are systematically bringing the Ukrainian garrison's evacuation and rotation routes under fire control. Expert assessments suggest Ukrainian forces currently maintain a supply line only through a crossing on the Siversky Donets, running onward through a forest tract toward Piskunivka. That corridor is now the primary priority target for Russian artillery and aviation. A resolution at Kryvyi Luka appears to be approaching. Costantinovka, the gap between plans and reality. Now for what might be called the uncomfortable truth. The Costantinovka sector, the Chief of the General Staff in today's briefing, essentially sidestepped this settlement, mentioning it only in passing. And that silence is itself eloquent. To recall the context, as far back as December 2025, Russian military command set a task to bring Kostiantinivka under full control by mid-February, at the latest by end of January 2026. Today is April 21st, 2026. Nearly 3 months have elapsed beyond that stated deadline. The map result, by the most optimistic estimates for the Russian side, incorporating controlled territory, grey zones, and infiltration areas, no more than 15% of Kostiantinivka is under Russian control. This is a fundamental divergence between declared intentions and operational reality. The Ukrainian side is holding the city, holding it with a tenacity that has evidently exceeded Russian command's projections. Heavy FAB 3000 bombs are being used, intensive airstrikes conducted, bases of FPV drone operators targeted, temporary deployment points struck. All of this creates pressure, but it is not translating into territorial advance. 2 points Gerasimov did mention in relation to Kostiantinivka. Active fighting in the area of the settlement of Ilyanivka on the southwestern outskirts of the city, and high-intensity engagements at Novodmitrivka. This is indeed traceable on the maps, Corrections in these areas have been recorded over the past several days. There is peripheral movement, but the city itself, not yet. Dobrovolska direction. Khryshin cleared, eyes turning south. Here the news is more concrete and better verified. The Russian Ministry of Defense has officially confirmed an advance in the area of the settlement of Khryshin. Importantly, this information did not emerge from thin air. Mapping services had already been recording changes in this area several days before the official announcement. The ministry's report essentially caught up with the cartography rather than getting ahead of it. This speaks in favor of the data's credibility. The advance is real, not declarative. According to the latest available information, the Russian army did not merely enter Khryshin. It passed through it entirely and has drawn up to the settlements of Novoalexandrivka and Vasilivka. A regrouping is currently underway ahead of further movement. Next in line are the smaller settlements to the south of Dobropilya. If the current tempo is maintained, the battle for Dobropilya itself is projected to begin around June 2026. Simultaneously, reports are coming in of fighting around the settlement of Novyi Donbass. The battle for this small village has already dragged on for several months. The situation there remains stalemated, but the pressure is unrelenting. Dnipropetrovsk direction, figures and reality. On this axis, a statement was made today claiming that Russian units have established control over more than 75% of a settlement, specifically Novopavlivka. However, once again, a discrepancy emerges between official claims and independent mapping data. The majority of analysts, regardless of their political orientation, assess Russian control over Novopavlivka at no more than 50%. The overall vector is nonetheless clear. Russian units are building momentum on this axis with the objective of breaking out into open operational space south of the settlements of Medjeve, Oleksandrivka, and Vesele. This opens prospects for further expansion of the controlled zone in this sector. Zaporizhzhia direction, Verkhnya Tersa, and strikes on the city. On the Zaporizhzhia sector, a small but telling correction has been recorded in the area of the settlement of Verkhnya Tersa. Notably, the source was footage published by the Ukrainian side itself, showing the movement of Russian servicemen in the southern part of the settlement. Based on this footage, a number of mapping services have made adjustments north of Kharkiv, updating data for agricultural facilities in that area. Beyond the ground activity, over the course of the day, the Russian side delivered a series of massed strikes against the city of Zaporizhzhia itself. Local residents recorded numerous explosions. By the nature of the targets, possibly warehouses, substations, or critical infrastructure. Precise information is still being verified. Ukraine's internal front, mobilization, the TCC, and the information campaign. Let us now turn to what is happening inside Ukraine. And here, there are several highly noteworthy storylines. First, and perhaps the most unexpected. In a matter of weeks, Ukraine's active martial law and active mobilization regime will expire. Under normal circumstances, a bill to extend both by another 90 days would be submitted to the Verkhovna Rada between April 10th and 20th. This has become an established procedural routine, observed without exception on every previous occasion. Today is April 21st, 2026. There is no bill, no formal submission, no public discussion. This is an anomaly. What lies behind it? The most plausible explanation is an internal conflict between the office of the president and the Verkhovna Rada. Tension between these institutions is no secret, but if it has now reached a level at which even a routine procedural step is being stalled, that is a serious symptom. In all likelihood, a corresponding statement will be made and the bill will be filed before the end of the week. But the delay itself is a signal worth noting. Second, against this backdrop, a large-scale campaign is unfolding in the Ukrainian media space aimed at stabilizing public sentiment. The key narrative: the return of men of fighting age currently residing abroad. The aggregate figure announced so far by European partners stands at 56,000 potential recruits. France has signaled readiness to facilitate the return of 40,000 individuals. Ireland, another 16,000. Other countries have yet to name figures publicly. This number is being presented as a demonstration of fairness, showing those who are fighting that the authorities are working to ensure the burden does not fall solely on those who remained. Third, and arguably the loudest story on the domestic front in the past 24 hours. Odessa. Today, information emerged about a security service of Ukraine operation targeting several minibuses belonging to the territorial recruitment centers. TCC officers, according to available reports, were detained on suspicion of extorting money from the local civilian population, including from individuals holding legal deferments. A specific figure has been cited, $30,000, allegedly extorted from a citizen of Odessa Oblast. During the exchange of money, a conflict broke out within the group, after which the SBU's operational response was triggered. The consequences are already materializing. Ukrainian Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief Syrsky has relieved the head of the Odessa TCC of his duties, along with a number of district-level commanders. According to available information, the SBU's operational activity in Odessa will not stop there. Further investigative sweeps are expected in the near future. This is an acutely sensitive issue for Ukrainian society, as the TCC has long been a source of social tension, and any signal of abuse within the system is received with particular pain. Oil, Hungary, and the €90 billion loan. A separate storyline with clear geopolitical dimensions. The Druzhba pipeline. According to available information, today was supposed to mark the resumption of oil transit through this route. However, a conflict has again arisen between Budapest and Kyiv. The new Hungarian Prime Minister stated plainly, Ukraine must not use oil transit as a political leverage tool. If the capacity exists, it must be used, not turned into a bargaining chip. At the same time, signals are coming through that transit resumption will in fact occur in the near future. And this has direct financial consequences. Unlocking Druzhba is expected to trigger negotiations over a €90 billion credit facility for Ukraine. The funds, based on available indications, are intended by the Ukrainian side for a large-scale military rearmament program, with an eye toward a serious confrontation in early 2027. This is an important strategic horizon that must remain in view when analyzing the overall situation. The Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz on the brink of escalation. We close today's briefing with a story that may become the top global headline within the coming hours: Iran and the United States. Tonight, the deadline on the ultimatum issued by the American president to Iran expires. This is not background noise, it is an immediate determinant of what will unfold across the Middle East in the days ahead. The situation is at boiling point. Just hours before the opening of talks in Islamabad, U.S. Special Operations Forces seized yet another tanker allegedly linked to Iran or on the sanctions lists. Footage of the seizure entered public circulation. It shows American Special Forces boarding the vessel and taking control. This is a deliberate show of force ahead of the negotiations. The message to Tehran is unambiguous. Washington will make no concessions on the issue of Hormuz Strait control. The strait must remain open, and the United States intends to enforce that through military means. That is simply something Tehran will have to reckon with. The American side continues to publish footage illustrating the scope of the blockade in the strait area. The video records include missile launches, meaning the operation carries not only a demonstrative but a genuinely combat character. Over the 2 weeks of the ceasefire, the U.S. made productive use of the pause. Additional amphibious ships and carrier strike groups were repositioned to the theater of operations. The force was reinforced. By current assessments, Washington is technically prepared to launch a new intensive strike campaign against Iranian territory, analogous to the one conducted several weeks ago. That previous scenario ended in the depletion of munition stocks and the need for another ceasefire to replenish resources. The same logic appears applicable now. As for the Islamabad talks, at the time this material was prepared, no firm confirmation of an Iranian delegation's participation had been received. The picture closely resembles the situation on the eve of the previous negotiating round. Tehran denies readiness for dialogue until the very last moment. Tables conditions, specifically the unblocking of the strait, and then shows up at the venue literally an hour before proceedings begin. There is a strong probability we will see this scenario play out again, and with equally high probability, the outcome will be either another week's extension of the ceasefire, accompanied by public statements about significant progress, or a resumption of high-intensity hostilities. In the current configuration, a third option is virtually nowhere to be seen. That brings today's briefing to a close. We have covered all the key axes together, from Kharkiv to the Strait of Hormuz. Keep watching developments closely, because several of today's storylines, the Islamabad talks, the mobilization situation in Ukraine, the evolving picture near Lyman, may produce fundamentally new inputs within the coming hours. If this briefing was useful to you, give it a like and share it with anyone who values analysis without the noise. One more reminder, subscribe and hit the notification bell, otherwise YouTube simply will not show you the next upload. That is not an exaggeration, it is the reality of how the platform treats content like this. Until the next briefing, friends, stay safe.